Welcome, folks, to 52 Living Ideas. I'm honored to have CJ Fionley back. This is Comprehensivist Wednesdays, which we do in association with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. It's an amazing, amazing organization, and I have met so many of folks from that meetup. Here, CJ, Joe, Marisa, and the list just goes on. So there is something in the water in Philadelphia and something really stirring. So wonderful to have CJ. And CJ, floor is yours.
Welcome to Comprehensivist Wednesdays, an ongoing series of weekly events designed to foster the art of comprehensivity, our capability to integrate all our sources of learning so as to better comprehend the world and how it works. I think the idea of comprehensivity is best captured by this quote from Buckminster Fuller's book, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. Wanting to understand all and put everything together. Although it is impossible to fully achieve by any one human being, it is my conviction that the aspiration of comprehensivity opens new worlds of learning that are not possible through other approaches. To develop our comprehensivity, our interest in broadly and deeply understanding our worlds and its peoples, we actively consider the learning in other traditions that may seem very strange to us. When we explore these kinds of resources, we may come across ideas that puzzle or intrigue us. The practicing comprehensivist will, from time to time, want to linger, to explore a line of thought by following questions that arose during a prior exploration. This event explores a question that might have arisen during our March 17th examination of change as ongoing genesis, ongoing creation. A key motivating issue for today's continuation of that exploration will be how to create that which is not yet. Many of the ideas we will look at tonight are adapted from the 2012 book, The Design Way, by Harold G. Nelson and Eric Stolterman. This book is like reading from a fire hydrant. It cannot be recommended for everyone, but I plan to continue sprinkling its ideas into various events here and there because it has a number of profound ideas that I think are important. Tonight's subject is how to create that which is not yet. I have 3 presentations on this, each of which will be followed by a short breakout for you to discuss the ideas among yourselves. The breakouts will be a little shorter than usual so we can fit in 3 of them. The idea is for everyone to weigh in on what you think of these ideas. So listen for what is resonating and what you are resisting so you can discuss that in the breakouts. There will be a Q&A before the second breakout after the second segment. And at the end, there will be the usual opportunity for everyone to contribute your comments, reflections, takeaways, and closing thoughts on our subject. So for part 1, the fundamental role of design. Let's start with a quote from The Design Way. It's right there on page 1 in the first paragraph. Genesis is ongoing. Wiktionary, my go-to online dictionary, tells me that Genesis means the origin, start, or point at which something comes into being. The Design Way says Genesis is ongoing. This quote may precipitate the realization that our ever-changing world creates itself. How might we experience this ongoing genesis? I see three possibilities. First, we might experience the ongoing genesis as a world that just happens. Things form and come to be, and we become aware of them. This is the view of the world that things just happen. It is our observer's frame, the observational frame, the frame of our concrete experience. To understand such a world, we interpret the changes observed in our ongoing experience. As we organize our interpretations, we form a story we tell ourselves and others about the ongoing happenings. From this stance, the design of the world in its dynamic changing is our ever-developing story about the world as created by our interpretations. That is, the ongoing genesis is our ever-evolving interpretation of our experiences. The second way in which we might experience ongoing genesis might be by imagining the new arrangement of things, the new design in the world. We would imagine this as the consequence of our collection of causal beliefs, causal models, theories, and abstractions about the world. Here we focus on seeing the changing world through the confirmation or the collision of our best beliefs about how the world changes with the reality of our experience. This is the causal analytic frame. We perceive the changing design patterns of the world through the lens of our beliefs, our models, theories, and abstractions, instead of as raw experience data. It is our educated view of reality. The ongoing genesis is embedded in the causal explanations which describe how the designs in the world change. Yet another approach for experiencing the world and its change as ongoing genesis is to recognize that everything we do in the world changes it. Our actions and how we participate shapes the ongoing genesis. If we fail to act, we create a world filled with watching, waiting, lethargy, inaction. This approach emphasizes that, like it or not, we are responsible as co-designers for our worlds. Our collaborators include the sun, the moon, volcanoes, eukaryotes, including plants and animals and people, bacteria and archaea. And in a global pandemic, of course, we must include viruses. In fact, it seems to me that all three of these approaches comprise the ongoing genesis of our world. Our ever-evolving interpretations of ever-changing experience is one way. The models and theories we use to understand the changing patterns of our worlds and the actions we take as we participate as co-designers of ongoing genesis. Each of these approaches contributes to how we create our worlds. Each affects the others in a complex feedback loop. In my experience, most of us do not think of ourselves as designers. even less as designers with a world creating role. But each of us is a designer. We create our worlds in all three of these senses outlined above. In summary, your experiences, your beliefs, and your actions co-create our worlds in collaboration with all the other actors. But wait, is it possible to live our lives while simultaneously designing them? The book, The Design Way, has a wonderful metaphor for seeing design in precisely this way. They say designing is like laying track for a moving train while on board. Yes, it's unimaginably complex. Welcome to life on Earth. Is seeing ourselves as co-designers of our worlds the logical implication of seeing the world as ongoing genesis, ongoing creation? Does your participation in the world necessarily make you a designer of the world? Is this design role an imperative stemming from our ongoing genesis? What do you think of your creative role in contributing to ongoing genesis? Shrikant, I think I'd like people to think about this first part in a breakout, maybe 6 people per breakout with 2 minutes a person for 12 minutes. I've led this kind of topic at the Thinking Society, and I've had a lot of trouble getting people to see the ideas, but I was impressed at my breakout. All 6 participants really saw the basic ideas. So I think finally I've maybe expressed it clearly for the first time in my life. Let's see if the second part is as good. This part, we're going to explore the fundamental role of desire. As we become aware of our design role, something about my screen looks weird.
Oh,
I don't have my video.
You don't have your video on, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I knew okay. I said something's missing. As we become aware of our design role in ongoing genesis, we might wonder, how do we go about creating our worlds? How can we create that which is not yet? In his interpretation of Purgatorio 5 in Dante's Great Commedia, Giuseppe Mazzotta said, we're impelled by desire. And desire is really what moves us. It's desire that impels us to go one way or the other. If Mazzotta and Dante are correct, desire may be the impulse that leads us to act in the world, to create that which is not yet. Even if we do something on a whim, even if we regret it later, we would say, in the moment, I did it for this or that desired outcome. Is desire the source of all our change-making impulses? Is desire necessarily the impulse to create that which is not yet? Is desire the trigger for all the big changes we make? The book, The Design Way, says, desire is the destabilizing trigger for transformational change. But we may worry. Our desires might foist themselves unrestrained into our ongoing genesis. Moreover, one desire may run roughshod over others. Many desires, if untempered, quickly lead to vice. So even though our desires may influence our actions and thereby contribute to ongoing genesis, how can we address the fact that our desire can be destructive at times? Again, I turn to the design way to find a possible answer. The book says, to differentiate positive desires from negative ones is one of our lifelong tasks as human beings. Rosaline Trainer, in a 2001 lecture, has called this process befriending our desires. She explains that when we become aware of and comfortable with our desires, they begin to have an accepted place in our lives and can function as a form of guidance. Must we befriend our desires so they can guide us to create that which is not yet, that which is not yet that we desire? Instead of our raw desires, is it our befriended or otherwise organized desires that give us the energy and guidance we need to create that which is not yet? The design way says, desire can be understood as the force that provides us with intrinsic guidance and energy. One way we might organize our desires as a guide for effecting our ongoing genesis might be to integrate that which is desired with that which is, and with that which ought to be, as well as with that which feels right. That is, we might want to think about our situation comprehensively in consideration of our desiderata, that's our full set of desires, our knowledge, our ethics, and our aesthetics. Since we must co-design our ongoing genesis with others, it seems best to incorporate the desires, knowing, values, and styles of other stakeholders, including future generations, into our broadly considered desiderata. The design way explains, desiderata refers to those things that are believed to be desirable. However, the design way warns us that a comprehensive approach to our design responsibility can lead to inaction or paralysis. They identify 3 difficulties which a comprehensive approach to design may face. I actually used this list in my presentation last August on the impossibilities of comprehensivism. First, we face analysis paralysis. When our desire for thoroughly understanding our situation endlessly gathers more and more information without a means for convergence on an effective way to create what is more desirable, then analysis paralysis can block us from achieving what we desire. Secondly, value paralysis. When our desire for integrating all our values and those of our other stakeholders into our effort to create change without an effective way of transcending their mutual ambiguities and contradictions, then value paralysis can block us from achieving what we desire. Thirdly, the paralysis of holism. When our desire for integrating the full context of everything we are considering into a big picture without an effective means to limit or contain our survey, then the paralysis of holism can block us from achieving what we desire. Despite these dangers, the design way recommends that we carefully assess our desiderata as we consider creating that which is not yet. The book, The Design Way, says desiderata form the imperative voice of design. Imperative means obligatory and impossible to be avoided. Is desire the motivation, the impetus, and the imperative guiding us to create that which is not yet as we participate in ongoing genesis? Shrikant, I'm thinking if we do a Q&A, we might find some people that are having some resistance or have some questions. We might be able to help them with a Q&A.
Sure, let's try. So folks, if you have questions, go ahead and put a exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Questions only at this point for clarification, trying to get at what CJ is presenting. The rules are the same. Type exclamation mark to speak, keep on topic, be brief, feel free to disagree courteously. Abram followed by Ray, followed by Kevin. Abram, go ahead.
Yes. Now, this could be semantics, or maybe I'm splitting hairs, but is desire the same as needs, necessity, or is it something different?
I think they're different. The book, The Design Way, thinks they're different. Need sort of implies that we already have done an analysis, that we already know what it is that we need. Desire feels to me a little more open. Desire, of course we desire what we need, or maybe we need what we desire. In the moment, I'm freezing what the Design Way's critique of need is. I'm trying to think of it. But language is the kind of thing that each person develops on their own. And so I don't think you could penalize someone for saying, no, those are synonyms. The problem, I think, is when we talk about need, we generally talk about it imperially. Not generally. Sometimes we talk about it imperially. Both I need this and, you need this. And desire maybe gets it to the individual. What do you desire? What does someone else, it might. I'm going to stop there because I didn't think through that one enough to give a pat answer.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Ray, Kevin, Vanessa, and Donna. Ray.
Yes, thank you. Would you say that desire and manifestation are parallel terms in terms of attracting or bringing things into our life?
The way I hear the word manifestation right now is as a resultant. As in, I desire something, I maybe act in the world either impulsively or intentionally, and something manifests. In my way of thinking, desire may manifest, as we get into the third part and the model of design in the third part, there'll be more to say on this. Desire does have some connection to manifestation, but I don't think it's necessarily direct. Very often what we desire doesn't come to be. We implement it wrong. It wasn't the right desire. I don't think it necessarily results in a manifestation. Although when the desire is, works, and the plan comes to order, it can feel that way, so.
Thank
Okay.
you. Next up is going to be Kevin, Vanessa, Donna, Peggy, and Madeline. Kevin.
Thank you, CJ. Come back. And
Kevin, could you speak into the mic?
yeah, thank you for reminding me. Yeah. In reality, few people desire what we need. For example, Jeff and Elon Musk. I got a question: should we avoid monopoly from an ethical or democracy perspective? What are your thoughts about that? Thank you.
Can we? I missed the logic there.
Okay, the logic is, let's see, we have only desire. How about a collective desire for common ground, like common share? You think about Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, the good designer, good desire. How I feel they desire for the things what we need. But for another way, think about, should we avoid those monopoly from ethical and democracy perspective?
Well, I don't. You're going into economics.
CJ, if you want, we can skip the question because it is going too far off into the kind of application.
Into economics and applications. Yeah. The frame I'm trying to keep here is both individuals in our lives and, if we get into hard problems like, we need to, stop climate change. So we need to do we desire to stop climate change. Then we have really big, complicated, hard problems. And my aim in this presentation is to sort of get at the basics of our role as co-creators and designers, and the big, hard economic problems, I think, need a more powerful model than what I'm presenting tonight. So I would say that I think this model applies to the harder situations, but that they need more tools, more infrastructure.
Thank you. Next up is Vanessa, followed by Donna. Vanessa.
Okay, after reading the essay, can it actually be productive, maybe quickly or without much foresight, to act upon one or few of the raw desires, which may actually result in an epic failure? Might you learn quite a lot if maybe you analyze and critique it, such as maybe why did it fail, so maybe you can avoid in the future?
Yeah, I organized a topic on mystique a month or two ago, and I think you can't avoid making mistakes. I think that's necessary and inherent in the process. Our desires always lead to, I believe, miscues, mistakes, errors. We would all love to avoid the big disasters in our lives, and our fiction and our headlines in the newspaper are filled with those desires that seemed to be well-intended but ended up making front page news or the plot for a novel. So, yes, desires can often go awry. And for me, the question is, how do we deal with that? This design way proposes Rosaline Trainer's idea, befriending your desires, if you leave them in the raw state, perhaps it's more dangerous than if you think them through, befriend them, organize them. And that's an open question. What do we need to do to our desires to make them a positive force as they can be, and to prevent those problems that we read about in the headlines and in our fiction?
Thank you. Next up is going to be Donna, and then I'm going to read out the question by Peggy. Donna.
This is a great conversation. Thank you, CJ. Very exciting topic. Where do you see the desires coming from? So, because I see a couple of things that I'm curious what your take is. Thoughts, emotions, the process and interactivity of that, as well as oneness, spirit, and source. And with that, I also want to add, how do you feel about the correction of this oneness of spirit? For example, is there a in play besides desires of individuals, that there is a collective correction or movement to see in the future, to foresee and make a correction on what's best for the collective? And we can take climate change as an example. So basically an unseen force at play.
Yeah, I'll address the second one first and then the first one second. The oneness of spirit, this collective. I think it might even be impossible to know whether such a thing is, half of 7 or 8 billion people tuning into, in my locality, we're seeing floods. In my locality, we're seeing drought. In my locality, the glaciers have disappeared. And each person, for different reasons, says something's amiss here, and I don't know what to do, but I'm going to work on it. And then maybe it coalesces. Or you want to go to spirituality. How could you do an experiment to discern whether it's a spontaneous realization by billions of people happening independently by just looking out the window for a change, or is it some cosmic evolutionary force that's bringing us to a convergence? You can't know that scientifically. You just have to, guess or do what you believe, or think of it how you want to. So let me leave it that part at that. Now, the sources for our desires, thoughts, emotions. I think the sources of our desires are manifold. A big one, of course, is intuition. What do I feel? What does my mind tell me? Probably a bigger one is social. And I was just watching, Gene Youngblood died recently. He wrote the book Expanded Cinema. And he suggested that, consent is manufactured. So a lot of our desires come from TV advertising, from media sources, from billboards. I walk down the block, I see a billboard. A lot of our desires come not from us, but from what the economic powers in our society are investing lots of money to get us to believe. As we found out in the last 2 presidential elections, the Russian government has quite a sway over a large number of the American population with their propaganda efforts. So desires may not come from us. They may come from social forces, forces beyond us, that, sometimes we can identify them, sometimes we can't. It could be a fad, a trend that just appears, no one predicted. Although I've seen some reports that there are people in the design industry that feel it's their job to figure out what is going to be the trend in 4 years so that we know what kind of color scheme to put on clothing that people are going to want to buy. And they believe that they do a pretty good job of projecting that years in advance. So just because I like this color scheme doesn't mean it came from me, my intuition. It might have come from the movement of Duchamp in Paris 3 years ago that led to a worldwide fad in this particular color pattern.
Thank you. Next up is Peggy, Madeline, Joe, and Mike. Peggy. Peggy, you need to unmute yourself. Okay, let's go to the next person. Peggy, whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Now I don't know if I want to join what the topic was or go to my question. But
you can go to your question if that's a very good question. So go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I was wondering, isn't that just the most exciting thing, to be able to focus on thinking about things that haven't been thought about? And yeah, why don't we, do that more often, more frequently, teach it in school if it can be taught? I don't know. But I think that's the most fascinating aspect of our thinking power. So
the imagination, that which is not yet.
Mm-hmm. As a kid, that was my way of going to sleep or trying not to sleep. Is every night I imagine something to, solve a huge problem in the world. And well, then eventually I fell asleep. But the idea was, let's think about this different, let's say it was the time of the hunger in the Sahel area, and Red Cross sending help, and it wasn't the right help, and people were still starving. And so I thought, there must be other ways. Let me think, and with my 7, 8, 9-year-old brain, I tried to figure things out. How could we do this different? And yeah, so I haven't changed many things in the world, but I like to keep looking for other ways on solving issues, if there is, a way, instead of just repeating what has been done all over and over and over.
Thank you, Peggy. All right, CJ, if you want to respond, you can respond, but otherwise we'll go to the next.
Thank you, Peggy. That was great. I think the imagination is central. And I think we all have it, but in our culture, it's not, we've been decreasing funding in the arts, and fewer and fewer schools have art classes, as I understand it. And yet, and I only took one art class in college, but yeah, it made all the difference, right?
Thank you. Next up is Madeline, Joe, and Mike, and then we're going to do breakout rooms. Madeline.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you, CJ. It was very comprehensible. I really appreciated it that you placed us in the context of the rest of the natural world, somewhere between volcanoes and archaea. I do a lot of thinking about that in terms of evolutionary biology and also about Umwelt theory. And I was wondering if you could address the three components of Genesis just from the perspective of the rest of the natural world, if you think it applies at all, or if it's really, you're just talking about human beings? Just go ahead and riff on that if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I'll try to riff on it. I don't know if I have any thoughts, so this will be completely thinking out loud. So the three models I presented on, you know, how did that go? It was our experience. You know, certainly all organisms that have brains, and even we know plants and bacteria, they have some chemical sensing. So, you know, we can think of that as raw experience in some sense. So at the level of raw experience and happening, certainly animals are involved. Now, do animals come up with beliefs and theories? And, you know, I've seen no evidence that they have theories. It might be that they work more at the experiential level. But you know, I have a parakeet. Actually, Jeannie got the parakeet, but and it finds patterns in human behavior, and a pattern is the first step of model building. We like to think our human theories and whatnot are complex. So at the level of theory, and of course at the level of action, yes, all animals act, and even bacteria and plants, archaea and viruses are all acting. The only iffy area is the modeling, and that's a question of abstraction. Actually, it's a question of, do animals have abstraction? And let's save that for a PhD thesis.
Thank you. Next up is Joe, followed by Mike. Joe.
Hi, CJ, and thanks for the presentation. It's awesome. Just a really quick question, and it kind of falls along the same lines that Vanessa's question actually kind of got to, is the idea of using desire as the intrinsic guidance in our energy. And I was thinking the idea of avoidance of, instead of using necessarily desire as a guiding principle, meaning in the sense avoidance of suffering or avoidance of negative outcomes, whether it be to environment or not. Maybe contrast that with desire as opposed to maybe trying to use our desires as a driving force. What would you, is that, are they diametrically opposed is what I'm trying to say?
I mean, linguistically, I think you could say that desire includes both what we desire to move toward and what we desire to move away from. So avoidance is the desire to not starve, the desire, you know, I mean, is there really a distinction? The distinction is between a positive and negative well, a positive or negative moving toward. Do you desire to move toward? My personal bias is that positive orientation is more powerful. The problem I have with negative avoidance is that when you focus on what you want to avoid, the danger always is that you're spending all this time thinking about, you know, what you want to avoid instead of thinking about how to get beyond it. So this is one of my concerns. I mentioned, for those of you in the Dante reading group, I mentioned today that, You know, one of my fears that we're reading Dante and we're learning all these sins, and, you know, my gosh, you know, I'm filling my mind with all the ways to sin. What good is that? You know, I'm not sure avoidance desires, you might get tricked. One of my worries about books like 1984, you know, George Orwell's, you know, now I got a recipe for the Trump administration, how to do it, you know, step by step. And then even though we've got the book, we can't stop it. You know, it's like you set up a self-fulfilling prophecy by trying to avoid and trying to avoid, you create. I think there's a lot of danger there, but that gets into psychology. I think from a logical perspective, desire can be both toward and away from, and the logic can work in either way. And so I think desire is the more general term, the term that applies even when you're avoiding.
Thank you, CJ. Last question is from Mike. Mike, what's your question?
I'm focused on your diagram, how to create that which is not yet. And I'm trying to map that into other things that we've talked about before. And a couple things that do you have in here a situation where you filter out desires, that all desires are not created equal? Do you have in there a place where you converge on a goal that somehow you start with the end state and map toward and try to approach it from both directions? And I'm trying to think that I have heard of this or looked at this design book that you're referring to, Design Wave. And also that approach has been talked about by Jeff Bezos and how he built his organization too. And
Mike, can you ask a question?
Always look back.
Yeah.
And have blinders on in the right place and not have blinders on in the right place. And I don't see, can you say, is that in your diagram in some places?
I hope so. I haven't presented the diagram yet. That'll be in the next segment. So I'm afraid we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's, is there anyone else, Shrikant? We were going to do...
let's go ahead and do the breakout rooms. What do you think?
Yes, I think we have time. So I think we probably have time for 15 minutes. I'd really like people to think through these ideas. Let's set the diagram for those people who read the essay. Not everyone's read the essay. Let's save that for the end. But focusing on the first two parts, where I talked about design, our ongoing genesis, and the responsibility as co-designers to create ongoing genesis, in this role of desire, befriending our desires. So explore that and try to create a little conversation to explore what people are thinking about that, what you're resisting, what you're liking, and try to think through some of the consequences a little.
Wonderful. And again, reminder, let everybody talk for about a couple of minutes on their take so you get everything on the table and then have a conversation. Keep on topic, be brief, and be courteous. Starting.
You need to mute yourself, Frank.
Sorry. All right, so we are back. Sorry about that. We're back. And on to the third section. CJ.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, in the third and final part, I want to talk about the fundamental role of intention. Although desire can be conceived broadly as desiderata, although desire conceived broadly as desiderata is what moves us to create that which is not yet, the design way identifies another important aspect of our desiderata. Desiderata are about what we intend the world to be. Even when we are not consciously organizing our desiderata into focused efforts to make intentional change, our desiderata form our intentions. When we create our ongoing genesis through our raw desires, the accidents and whims of our desires shape our lives. By first organizing our desiderata into intentions, we give direction to our creative effort to shape our ongoing genesis. The book, The Design Way, advises us intention is best understood not as a vision, but as the aiming and subsequent emergence of a desired outcome. Desiderata help to aim and name one's intentions. But intention is not only about where to get to, it is also about which direction to go to get there. How to aim so as to move closer in proximity to our desired ends. And now I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me a second while I bring up this image that Mike talked about earlier. There, and now I need to start the video again.
We can see it very nicely.
Okay.
Very good.
It looks good?
Yes.
Okay, so we are now able to organize a basic design cycle to answer the question, how do we create that which is not yet, in support of our ongoing genesis? We start by assessing our desiderata well, it's on my left. I hope it's not reversed. Some videos
it's on our left too, so it's the same.
Okay, good. Assessing our desiderata on the left, desiderata assessment. This is focused into an intention that gives direction to the changes we desire. Then we act in the world. A result emerges in the ongoing genesis which we have tried to shape. The result is often different from what we intended. This serves as feedback for another round of assessing our desiderata. This loop is also the mistake mystique, which I explored in the event on February 17th. And this loop iterates until you die. I think this model can serve both as a description of the nature of ongoing genesis for each of us, how ongoing genesis occurs and has always occurred in our lives. But more importantly, it is also a guiding model for how we create our lives, assess our relevant desires, organize them into intentions, act in the world, Assess how the effects of your actions affect your desiderata. Another round of desiderata analysis. Perhaps new desires emerge, or maybe a few fade away, or the quality and measure of some desires may have changed. On and on it goes as we iterate. Does this schema for a basic design cycle featuring desiderata assessments organized into intentions both describe and guide us as we contribute to ongoing genesis? What are the strengths and weaknesses of thinking about the change in our lives in this way? For the third breakout, consider this design model. If in the event description, there's a link to my essay, which has this picture if you want to look at it in the breakouts. Shrikant, any other guidance for the third breakout?
What I would like to do is, I think this is really the heart. I mean, this diagram actually captures philosophy of design better than anything else, because it's a holistic way of looking at it. So what we can do is we can have a short breakout room. And when you come back, if it is okay, CJ, let us try the lightning round, where people will come back with the biggest question they have on this topic. We will collect all the questions and then just do a rapid fire answering of all the questions. Anybody who wants to answer the question can answer. Anybody who wants to ask the question, they can do. So come back with questions. Does that make sense to you? This works beautifully, CJ.
Yeah, that's great. I'm game.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. We're going to do the breakout rooms for 12 minutes. Is that correct? CJ?
Yes, yes.
Oh, so just try to get the focus in the breakout rooms. Try to identify the best questions that you have. Discuss amongst yourself, but come back ready to pose your best question. Put your best question on the table. Okay, starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. All right. So it's time for the lightning round. So this is how it works. Many of you know about this, but this is a new invention that we have been developing for the past 3 weeks in these meetups, which have gotten rave reviews. So let's try it. So what we do is we start by you identifying the biggest question that you have. Okay, so go ahead and type exclamation mark to share your question. After, I'll collect all the questions. Okay, just questions at this point. Okay, and only one question, the biggest question on your mind. We'll collect all the questions, and then we will take them one by one, and we will go ahead and answer them. So everybody gets to answer the questions. Okay, and we try to answer them in as pithy way as possible, so we can cover as many questions about this topic as we possibly can. Okay, so it's going to be Madeline, Joe, Vanessa, followed by Donna. Madeline, what's your question?
Yes, which is, CJ, how do you see this? I see this mapping onto the OODA loop fairly well. For those who have forgotten, it's those two retired Air Force guys talking about John Boyd's ideas, which are observe, orient, decide, and act.
All right, I'm going to take a slight break here to connect this up. This very much goes, it's very, very similar idea. And we've done about 5 meetups on OODA loops so far. And Chet Richards, who has worked with John Boyd for 20 years, is going to be back this Saturday at 5 p.m. to talk about this idea again. It's all about observing, orienting, forming idea of what is going on, deciding what you need to do, and acting. and then again observing and doing that relentlessly as a way of living. So this is very much of, continuous design process. Looking at, and it deals with your ideas, it deals with your emotions, it deals with your actions all together. So I, very much recommend that. So go ahead. So Madeline, your question was, how is this related to OODA loop, right?
Yeah, basically, how would CJ or other people see these four elements and their interlocking arrows of this cycle, the basic design cycle, mapping onto the elements of the OODA loop?
Wonderful, thank you. Joe, what's your question?
I don't see him lined up in the chat, but I'm stealing somebody else's question. Is the idea of being overly motivated and how that relates to analysis paralysis.
Okay, what's the connection between being overly motivated and analysis paralysis? Very good.
Yeah.
Next up is going to be Vanessa. Vanessa, what's your question?
What about if you see something you have no desire? Like I said, you're random, you're just out there and you see an action and its repercussion. Is it possible to start at the action and like not even have a desire and then move forward from that?
Okay, can you start with the action without having the desire? Okay, very good. Next up is Donna. Donna, what's your question?
So I love this diagram of the iterative co-design of life. My question is, how does this diagram take into the impact of collective co-design? And January 6th is a perfect example, as well as conflicting co-design.
Very good. Excellent question. So how does the diagram account for collective co-design or competitive co-design? Wonderful. All right. Next up is going to be Tom. Tom, what's your question?
My question is, how do you turn a few sparks of desire into an intensely burning desire?
Wonderful. How do you build the fire? What's the process of building the fire of desire? Okay, very good. Next up is Kevin. Kevin, what's your question?
How do you validate your desire?
How do you validate your desire? Folks, if you have questions, this is your last chance. Go ahead and type exclamation mark in the chat. Any more questions? Okay. So first, Matt. Matt, what's your question?
Just a little better clarification of the terms desidera and my God, I'm out of it today. Not creation. What's the term being used?
That's fine.
Design.
So we got one.
Exactly.
Design.
That's it.
Okay. Desiderata and design. Could you clarify the terms desiderata or design? Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Next up is L. L, go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, thank you, Shrikant and CJ. CJ, I was not able to be here earlier, and I apologize if I'm redundant. This could be a great model for doing something about the environment. Do you have any comment on that?
Very good. How do you apply to doing something like doing something for the environment? Okay. Peggy, what's your question? Can you speak it out so everybody can hear? Sometimes people don't pay attention to chats.
Okay. So is there a common denominator or a baseline desire considered in this model?
Okay, very good. Is there a baseline desire or common? Okay, baseline design. Okay, very good. Okay, so let's start with, so folks, now we're going to go question one by one. And everybody is welcome to answer the question. So we will just put a question on the table. If you would like to answer it, you have to be very brief in answering it so we can get through all these questions, okay? So between 1 sentence to maybe 10 sentences. CJ has a special privilege. He can do 15 sentences if he wants. Let's start with the first one. How is this cycle connected to the ODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act? Anybody? CJ, are you familiar with the ODA loop?
I saw one of your videos. I'm going to respond with a question, and I'm wondering, where is desire in the OODA loop? I think it might be missing.
Oh, very good, very good. So let me try to answer that. So action is the same, right? In terms of what happens of the action, that is the part of observation. Now, the most complex part of the OODA loop is what he calls orientation. And that orientation part includes numerous things, including your cultural heritage, your values, your physical makeup. So lots of the desires will come from that. And what you're doing is that you're taking in the feedback that you're getting from your action, comparing it with all your premises, all your desires, all your thoughts, in order to form what he calls the orientation. And that goes into deciding, which is really, I call it design, of coming up with a plan of what you need to do, and then you act based on that. So that, it's the massive part of orientation, of which desire is one part, but it includes processing of a lot more information. So that's my quick answer. Let's see, who has the answers?
Well, does anyone else have an answer?
No, go ahead.
I'll add in that I see the OODA loop with its more complicated orientation assessment. The assessment in this model tonight is just in the desiderata. And I view the model that I presented tonight as very rudimentary, like very general. And for harder problems, this model might get you started, but I think you need a more complicated model. I think the OODA loop sounds like a more complicated infrastructure to handle bigger problems. But what I like about this model is by highlighting the desiderata, which I'm now understanding is part of the orientation of the OODA loop, and the intention, I think it clarifies and highlights something that most of the design models I've seen miss. And that is that you're really trying to create what we desire. That which is not yet, what we desire. And by emphasizing that, I think it makes design more accessible to more people, or that's my hope. And it sort of puts clarity on, when you get into complicated design models, sometimes you forget about the desiderata, you forget about the intention, because you're in this complicated model. And so I like it for those reasons, but I would not propose this in a really hard problem.
Wonderful. Joe, what do you think is the connection between the OODA loop and this loop?
Actually, CJ just covered what I was about to say. And I was actually going to comment basically on desiderata being the observed phase, because there was a conversation that was going on in chat. But I do think it's independent confirmation that this model works or has been well thought out, that that it does map onto OODA loop with observation and orientation, intention and action, and how emergence fits into that. So anyway, but CJ had covered what I was just about to say.
Wonderful. CJ, I'm going to prepone one of the questions. Can you explain the terms desiderata and the emergence, ongoing genesis briefly again?
Ongoing genesis is the idea that creation, what is coming into being, is ongoing sort of at every moment. And I've used it, I've framed the essay and my presentations, if you watch the video when it gets posted, to try to motivate design springing out of, oh my God, at every moment, Genesis is emerging. If I'm a spectator, it's just going to happen before me. But if I participate as a spectator, but if I participate as a co-designer, as an actor, then perhaps I can create what I would desire. As a spectator, there isn't much hope you're going to create what you desire. You know, hopefully you turn on the right channel and what you desire appears. But to create what you desire requires a designer approach. Desiderata is what we desire, and what we desire sort of in some way embeds what we intend. And this is the grand concept of design. And I think it's an imperative that we need to realize we all face.
Okay, then let me just continue on, because action is fairly simple. What is intention? How is intention connected with desiderata?
As I just mentioned, desiderata form our intention, but the design way emphasizes that intention should be thought of as an aiming, as the direction you're going. So I also think that not only do the desiderata embed an intention, but then the intention reforms the desiderata into the direction you're heading toward, which focuses your action, hopefully, on something more effective. But, you know, then you'll find out and get into mystique if it doesn't.
All right, CJ, you're making life very difficult for me, because your answers are so amazing that I'm just going to ask you questions. And if somebody else wants to add to that, please go ahead and do that. So, okay, I'm first going to ask the question to CJ, but if you would like to, if anybody would like to add anything to the answers, please feel free to do that. Okay, the next question is that, what is the connection of being overly motivated and analysis paralysis?
I think that's situational. You know, some people might, you know, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and we need to negotiate. We need to try things out and learn. And some of us get overly motivated and end up in a black hole, and 3 weeks have gone by and we haven't eaten, and, you know, it's a problem. But others of us have trouble getting motivated. And you know, I think that gets beyond the model we're talking about here and into the subtleties of execution and more advanced design models. What I'm trying to do here is get this sort of essence of design as a personal co-responsibility to create ongoing genesis and to give hope and direction that, you know, you don't need a complicated model like the OODA loop. For many times, you don't need that much.
Thank you. Thank you, CJ. So folks, if you want to answer any of the questions, feel free to just type exclamation mark and I'll call on you. Okay, CJ, next question is, can you sometimes start with action without having the desire? You know, realizing that this is action you need to take, and that being the starting point instead of desire.
In all biological life forms, action is caused by some chemical process that might include nerve impulses and whatnot that's connected to a brain, or if you're a plant, slower mechanisms. The desiderata, I think, is baked into the nervous system that created the action. So I think you're, but then again, the book has this wonderful illustration, a little image that shows, there's ready, aim, fire, fire, aim, ready. You can take ready, aim, fire and put them in permute all three factorial orderings, 6. I don't want to waste time listing all 6. It wouldn't improve the clarity. And you can think about that not as what it is, but as a problem. Some people act without thinking through their desiderata very clearly. Other people get into analysis paralysis we were just discussing. And so that's a critique, but conceptually, philosophically, what's really going on is there is a desire, a desiderata, an intention for a more desirable outcome, and everything else is a more complex design model, a more complex philosophy, but I'm trying to get what I hope is an essence.
Wonderful. Mike, what's your answer?
Well, your words, CJ, are to put circuit breakers at key points to modulate the desires, including to prevent deadlock, analysis paralysis, and faulty desires. And that with the exception of those in the OODA loop, they essentially formally put those decision points at basically the input and the output to decide how to spiral back to the thing. Other than that, as Madeline said, your picture is really the same as the OODA loop. And you verbally said that we need to modulate the desires to make your design work.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, next question. This is a really fascinating question. Question is that, can you use this diagram for understanding collective co-design, or even more difficultly, competitive co-design?
I think it hints and gestures in that direction. I think if you really want to get into collaborative and conflictive co-design, you'd want a better model. I think you'd want a better model in most things. The design way, they don't present one model of design. They present, I don't know, about 60. And this one that I presented isn't precisely given in the book, although the book does have a picture with, the basic desiderata, go to intention, go to action. But they didn't combine it into a cycle, and I've sort of embellished it a little. I think there are many, many design models, and each one may be needed in a given situation. One of the key ideas of the design way is that the first step in your co-design process is to design the design. To decide in this situation, what model do I want to use? What design approach do I want to use? and one of the problems with having a picture like I did for this is that it sort of gets in and tries to be general. And you know, in this situation, I might want to do it differently. So I don't want to ossify it too much. But I did try to design this one to get at a basic essence that I'm hoping inspires people that they can participate.
Right. Thank you. Next question. How do you take all these diverse sparks of desire that you have and build a roaring fire out of it?
That each person's got to figure that out for themselves. I'm not gonna tell you how to do that. I mean, I have my own style, and you know, that's the great challenge in life, is trying to measure your desires, figure out how to weigh them. How do you build it up into a roaring desire that really motivates you? Or maybe we should meditate and relax and take perspective, and at different times for different people in different situations, it's going to play out differently.
Wonderful. We got 3 people with answers. So folks, feel free to jump in and answer all these questions. Keep your answers brief so we can get through as many answers and as many questions as possible. It's going to be Vanessa, followed by Madeline and Abraham. Vanessa, how do you do this?
Well, I think something that has profoundly affected you. I'll use a few examples. Let's say you, the person that invented childproof locks, maybe they had a child of theirs or a close friend overdose on the pill and die. Or, you know, kid getting cancer on the other end. You could have had experience so wonderful as a child. You then want to recreate that for somebody else to make their life meaningful going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vanessa. Madeline.
Yes, Elena had asked me to speak on her behalf. She had put something in chat about the animals carrying the seed of a plant. So what she means is that there can be cooperation between people or between organisms or groups of people in which the original intention, let's say the seed, actually gets carried by someone else before it gets manifested. Okay. So there can be action before there is desire, even though neither party may be doing this on purpose.
Thank you. Next up is Abraham.
Yes. I want to answer the question about how do you get motivated or start a fire. I think the question is, why aren't you motivated? Why there isn't a fire? That's something you have to ask yourself, because if you're not motivated to do it, how important is it to you? What are the benefits? It's a personal challenge. So if you don't have a fire, you don't see that it's important. If it's not motivating you, it's just that you're not getting enough reward out of what you're trying to do. That desire isn't really satisfying anything in you. There is no gratification from what you're thinking about doing. So the question is not how to get motivated or start the fire. The question is, why don't I have the fire, and how much value will it have if I accomplish that task?
Excellent. Wonderful point. Thank you. Thank you, Abraham. Next question is, how do you validate your desire? CJ.
Validating desire gets into measurement, which the Design Way has a whole chapter on judgment. I led like 3 events for the Thinking Society on the chapter on judgment. Judgment is the way we measure our desires. And it is a very, very complex subject. which if we do these long enough, if I live long enough, I'll dedicate a whole session to judgment and measurement. There are many, history documents a huge number of suggestions about how to do that. You can go to the shelf and start picking out recommendations for how to make such judgments. As a comprehensivist, I've filled my shelf with a lot of them. And I think that's the best way, is to have a lot of tools in your judgment toolbox so that you can measure your desires according to whatever makes sense to you in this situation for whatever you're trying to achieve. Yeah, there.
Wonderful. So let me go ahead, and I want to make one comment. I think, this entire approach that you have of having multiple models is very powerful. I also have the same one. So for example, when I see this diagram, because I'm familiar with OODA loop, or I'm familiar with, Carl Jung's psychological functions, I immediately put them on this. And what that does, when you run two models in parallel, you can kind of see the limits and the strengths and weaknesses of each of them. And you can pick up something from, even if you continue to use your previous model as a primary model, you can learn a lot from the other models. Like, for example, this one focuses a lot more on the desiderata. There is some value to that. There is, some value for, so for me, I'm looking at OODA loop and Carl Jung's functions, and there is McLuhan has this idea of tetrads, of using, using 4 different effects of any tool. Any tool that you design has 4 different kinds of effects to measure different things. So I'm trying to put it all together. So it's very useful. So the question I have for you, you say that in this book, they cover 60 design models. So why did you pick this one? And what is the range of the models? And what is the advantage of looking at so many different models of design? What do you find useful about it?
Harold G. Nelson's PhD advisor, whoa, darn, I'm forgetting his name. Okay, so Harold G. Nelson, one of the co-authors, got his PhD, Churchman, C. West Churchman. Oh, wow, my eyes succeeded. C. West Churchman was a systems scientist, and he wrote a book designing the design, I can't remember. The idea is designing the design. Mm-hmm. And Harold Nelson, as his student, has picked up on this and includes, I'm just making up the number 60. As I've gone through this book, I've led 25, I think, events on it at the Thinking Society, and I haven't finished. I've got 5 more chapters to cover. It is an utter fire hose. It's like idea after idea, and I'm from this conversation today, so many of the comments have reminded me of how superficially I've explored it. It's a vast subject. But I think this idea of designing the design is the real, and I got it from this book, and he attributes it to C. West Churchman as really what design should be. The first thing you do with design is you design your design, and then so I think I've said all I can think of for that.
I also want to ask you one question. You started by saying that you've done 25 plus meetups on this topic, and most people, you find that don't get most of the things that are being said. Do you think people here got something from what was being said? Do you think, because you had chance of interacting with them at 3 different breakout rooms, you heard their questions. What do you think?
Yeah, this group has been fantastic. I don't know whether my write-up is clearer than in the past. I don't know whether your group is better than the Thinking Society in terms of this subject, but I received a lot of resistance, people thinking that Genesis is ongoing. That bothers a lot of people. The idea that design is part of everyday life, that each of us is designing our lives. You know, these are ideas that are not presented on television very often. And the knee-jerk reaction of most people is to resist what you've not seen or heard before. And so I was concerned that there would be a lot of resistance, and so I went very slowly and carefully and tried to make this as clear as I could so that it would be clear to people. But in the 20 odd other events, my overwhelming experience has been, oh, how do I get this across in the next event so that that'll be clear?
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. And I think, I mean, partly it is that, you know, I think you did a fantastic job. Also, the fact that you wrote the essay helps because people can read it. You know, writing has that power where it allows people to reflect on it and come prepared. But also the other thing is that, you know, we've been looking at similar ideas. And that's the power of multiple models. Okay, just to kind of, we talked about OODA loop, but we've also looked at Louis Sullivan, who talks about form follows function. Why you have to continuously keep working on your forms to match the function. It's a continuous iterative process of shaping things that serve your purpose, which is another way of putting, you know, another way of formulating the design. Or we've talked about people like Carl Jung, who talk about the importance of the limited things you are conscious of, and that you have to be open to this entirety of yourself and world, and be willing to take in corrective information to rework yourself. And that is the process of individuation. And that's what being human is all about. Not having this static idea of this is who I am, but growing into our immense capacity. We've also looked at things from another angle, like meditation or mindfulness, of saying, notice things. And all of these kind of coalesce together. And most of us have participated in several of those ideas. And all of it, there is also a tremendous focus on self-improvement in these meetups. So we relentlessly think about ourselves as being, you know, this is my self-ideal. This is where I'm going. How do you get there? It's going to be hard. I have to be willing to go through kind of hard to kind of give up my pet theories or stuff in order to get there. So I think all of that, so there is a lot of preparation that went on over the last 400 meetups that we did. So that also helps. And it also attracts the kind of people who like to think this way. So it is, you know, so as somebody put in the chat, you know, this is a natural home for ideas like this. So I think that is, and so it's partly you, partly what we have done in the group, and partly it's the kind of ethos of the group itself. So I think that's why I think it worked out amazingly well. And I thought this was just spectacular. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So CJ, what are you going to do next?
Well, I had some closing thoughts.
Please.
Let me share a few closing thoughts, and then I'll.
Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, I can do that. Where one thing I don't like about Firefox is when my mouse goes to the top of the screen. Okay. So the basic design cycle we explored tonight, with its focus on desiderata, intention, and action, is just one of many design cycles that have been proposed. It is much simpler than the ones developed in the design way. Although this design cycle schema captures what I see as the essential notion of design responsibility in Buckminster Fuller's comprehensive anticipatory design science approach, I've used the language of the design way instead of Bucky's language. I hope this design schema is satisfactory as a preliminary first cut gloss for Bucky's design science, even though it omits many crucial aspects of his approach. Another popular approach to design, which I have also studied, is called design thinking. I recognize it as a powerful framework for effective design. However, it does not seem to me to be as general as the model presented tonight. But of course, what the design model I presented offers in generality, it lacks in depth and detailed power that would be needed to address many professional design challenges, let alone a truly wicked problem, one where desiderata assessments fail to converge on any effective intentions. My hope is that this event has gotten across the imperative of design that each of us faces in our lives, and that you can now appreciate how to get a basic handle on our design imperative to address the relentless, ongoing genesis of our lives. I hope that seeing yourself as a world-creating designer is now both tractable and manageable. We are all counting on you to design well, because we all will have to live with the ongoing genesis that you create. Go forth and create that which is not yet together.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing.
So I'll be back on May 12th with the topic, how to explore the future and why. It is based on 1 hour of videos featuring the brilliant young futurist, Angela Ogantala. I've already posted the event early so that you can study her videos. They're just 1 hour, 54 minutes. But I've also posted early because in her videos, she mentions a couple of resources that I thought a motivated participant might want to look at as well. One of them, she recommends the book Midnight Robber. It's a novel by Nalo Hopkinson. And if you watch the video, you'll see what she says about Midnight Robber. And so a motivated participant might want to read the novel as well. In addition, Angela Ogantala talks about Nollywood movies. And I found a Nollywood movie, The Mirror Boy. It's a feature-length film, 1.5 hours or so. And if you watch that film, it will give you more insights into Angela Ogantala's approach to exploring the future. And so I wanted to post that event early so that those who are motivated to read novels and watch feature movies as well as video lectures can plan their month. I will write an essay, but that won't be available until early May. So I'll modify the event description when my essay becomes available.
Wonderful, folks. And I've just announced it on the Meetup, so you should have the email. So go ahead and RSVP. So I also want to let you know what is coming up on the Comprehensivist Wednesday next Wednesday. Sanjay, what are you doing next Wednesday?
So I think we're going to have a talk. We'll continue on neuroscience, and we'll talk about thoughts. That's the topic. That's the simplest way to explain it. But there's some video in the description on Meetup. You'll see some videos and articles that you can reference to prepare. And I would recommend people watch at least the first 2 videos. They're pretty short, about 20 minutes total, but it's really going to surprise you. And it will help in the discussion if you see those early. So basically, we'll go into thought and how thoughts occur in our mind and aspects around that.
Wonderful, folks. Sanjay has done a whole bunch of meetups on neuroscience, which are incredible. So go to the YouTube channel, 52 Living Ideas, and look for the neuroscience playlist, and you'll find it all there. All right. So CJ, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, folks. Always honored and grateful to have such great minds here. See you folks soon. Bye.